Hi there, this is the Common Magician with a tutorial. We're going to discuss marked cards today. Marked cards, and it's kind of an interesting subject for magicians. There's quite a few magicians there, or mostly, hobbyists like myself, who errantly feel that someone who's good at this, skill set at performing card magic would never use marked cards. They would never rely on such a gimmick. They would rely, of course, on a very vast library of card sleights and well-practiced and well-rehearsed moves. And that's just not true. Actually, some of the very best card magicians and most prolific practitioners out there use marked cards all the time. Not necessarily using them for their markings, but just use marked cards because of the benefits that it has and the opportunities that it provides in performing. So marked cards are a good staple for the magician. Now, I will note that there's no real good reason to avoid marked cards. Certainly, I think it's good to have a repertoire of tricks, of routines and performance pieces that do not rely on marked cards in the event that you are borrowing cards. If you're borrowing a deck of cards, you need to be able to use them in the condition that they're in, which is not likely to be marked. That being said, most people who perform card tricks regularly, either you're actually working and doing restaurant work or something and hopping tables, you're probably going to have your own cards. If you're doing some kind of performance event, you're going to have your own cards. If you're doing some street magic or you're performing out in the street and you have a gig in that sort of venue, you're going to have your own cards. So, why not have marked cards? Why not have a marked deck of cards? So let's take a look at this here a little bit closer. I have a few varieties of marked cards we're going to talk about, and these are all homemade. Before we get into that, we need to take a bit of time to discuss what kinds of marked cards there are. What are the various kinds and purposes of marked cards? So let's take a quick look at that. So there are a couple of types of marked cards, and they can be marked in very, very small and detailed ways, or they can be marked in very, very broad and obvious ways. And there's reasons why you would want to have either one of those, and the reason is itself obvious. You just think about this. If I can see the marking on the card, then it stands to reason that anybody can see the marking on the card. Now, that doesn't mean that anybody would know what the marking is or that they would even realize that they're looking at a marking, but that is just true. If the performer can see it, then the spectator can see it, and that's just a truth that you want to wrap your head around as you're deciding what kind of markings you're going to use for your cards. You can have very, very big markings, very broad, big markings, and you can have chemical-type markings that can be read with particular, glasses or contact lenses, or you can have large marker-type markings that could not be seen maybe from off stage, but to a stage performer are very obvious and very easy to see from a distance. And that might be a reason why you would use a very large marking. Very small markings, obviously would be used in very close-up kinds of situations where you're right on top of the cards and you can see them and you're aware of them, but the spectators, even though they might be able to see them, wouldn't notice them, and they would kind of go unnoticed. They would be missed. So that's kind of a basic understanding of the size and the obvious nature of the markings that you might have in your cards. Now, my guess is that most of you are going to be performing close-up, and you're going to be looking at kind of a smaller type of marking, and that's what we're going to look at, are kind of the really small ones, the ones that you'd have to know that they're there in order to notice them. Even some small markings in classical kind of modes of marking cards are obvious to see, especially in this day where there's tutorials out there and things become more public knowledge, and there's kind of a pop culture understanding of marked cards, I think, that has kind of ruined certain types of marking systems for us a little bit. So that if you're dealing with people who play card games, they might be aware of particular markings, particularly on bicycle brand cards, a certain way to mark them. We're going to look at that in a moment here. Dealing with small markings, there are two types of marks. There are markings that are indicated through some sort of system of reading, and there's various ways to do that. And then there's another type of marking which are referred to as readers. A reader is different from kind of a systematic marking, which has a code that goes with it, and you have to understand the code in order to recognize the meaning of the marks. A reader, on the other hand, reads the identity of the card, literally in numbers or letters. It gives you the value and the suit in some kind of text form. And the benefit to that is that you can look at it and you don't have to think about a code. You don't have to decipher the marking. You can just read what it is. Now, the other side of that is that a reader using text can much more easily perhaps be spotted by someone who's looking for marks. They can notice that kind of thing a little bit more easily and probably sort that out if they were really inspecting closely. Whereas something that is a code, depending on how obvious the code is or how obvious it is written, on the back of the card, a code can be seen and not noticed because it's not understood that it's being seen. Something that is not in text form can be looked directly at and not recognized as that marking, again, if it's not a very obvious alteration to the card. We're going to look at both of these, and we're going to start first by looking at a more code-based sort of marking, and then we're going to end up at the end looking at a type of readers. And these are all homemade. You actually can create readers homemade. There are a lot of tutorials out there for the creation of code systematic markings. We're just going to look at them. I'm not going to talk about really how to make them too much. We're going to focus mostly on the reader side of this because I think you'll find that a little more fascinating. There's not a lot of tutorials about that particular kind of marking. I do want to mention that there are a number of marked cards that are out there on the market that you can purchase. They're usually very, very expensive. And a lot of the more standard backed cards that have markings, particularly the bicycle type cards, are often readers. A lot of them tend to be readers more than they are some sort of code. And that's for good reason, I think, because they're a little bit easier to read again. Let's look first at the most common type of code marking. Then we'll look at a different way to create that same type of code. It's a little less obvious, I think, to notice. We'll look at how that can be applied to a non-bordered, non-ornate back, like we have here with this B deck, and then we'll finish up by looking at readers. Okay, so first of all, this is the most common form of marking. In fact, if you just look at this card, and you know cards, if you know bicycle, the back design, you'll probably see the markings right away, especially on this card. Let me go to another card. You'll probably notice what's going on here if you know anything about standard forms of bicycle markings. Okay, this one is using a clock type design or a flower petal type design, and on the back of a bicycle card there is a place where you have kind of a little clock there. This little flower. With petals on it. See if I can find another one here. Okay, so you see this little flower design with petals, and you'll notice that there's a petal missing right over here, and that has been darkened in. Now this has been marked symmetrically, so that if it is looked at, it's not noticed. Because it's such an obvious marking, it is not noticed so easily because it's marked symmetrically on both sides, not only on this end, but also the other end. So you can see that. Additionally, there's other places on the card where there are some dots or specks. Right here we have another kind of ornate design with some dots there. I'm actually going to get a pin. We're going to use this pin later on, but this is just a sewing pin to help me point at some items here. You can see these little dots right over here. These can also be used for the marking system. Now you see that all of them are there. There's 5 of them normally. Let me pick another card here, and you'll note that on this one, there is one missing. It's been darkened in. So the way this works is you take a magic marker. You just take a Sharpie, a fine point marker, black in this case because it's a black back. You would use red, a red one like this if you're using a red back, or blue if you're using a blue back. There's a lot of discussion about getting the right marker that has the right sort of pigment, the right sort of tint to it. What I have to say about that is it probably doesn't matter that much. Just doing these kinds of markings in general are fairly noticeable if you know what to look for. And if you don't know what to look for, having a color that's slightly off really isn't going to make that much of a difference. If people don't know what to look for and they're not looking for it, they're actually not going to notice the color being off a little bit. Now, markers do give a little bit of a shine at the end after you mark compared to the color of the back design. So one trick for that is after you make the mark and you let it dry, you just rub it over with your thumb or with a finger, and what it will do is it will kind of take that filmy shine right off of it, and it will help it blend a little bit better. So like I said, this is symmetrical. On this one, you would be reading the left side. So if we're looking at the left side, this should make a lot more sense. We'll say ace is nothing, 2, 3, 4, 5. So ace is when nothing is filled in, 2 is the top, 3, 4, 5 is filled in, and then over here, spades would be nothing, hearts would be the first one on the left. These 3 little dots would be the suit. So spade is nothing, heart is on there, so that's the 5 of hearts. Let's see if we can figure out the next one based on that information. In this case, it's the same on both sides because of the location of the petal. This looks to be the 6 of spades. 6 of spades, nothing is filled in over here, so it must be a spade. And the bottom one on the clock or the flower petal is filled in, so 6 of spades, and indeed that's what it is. So this is a very traditional kind of marking system that you can do just with a Sharpie and a bicycle deck. You can, fill in these spots here. You don't have to make it symmetrical. It's just something that I did a long time ago on this deck. Just a little nervous about how that looked. One thing about this kind of design, or really any kind of mark design, is that you can do a little bit of a test to notice the markings. And what you do is you just flip through it like a cartoon book. And like a cartoon book, you will see an animation. You'll see those flower petals kind of jumping around. See if I can get to a place where there's no glare. Hopefully we don't hear this too loudly, but you'll see how those petals are jumping around as I riffle through it. So this is the way that you can identify marks, and there's ways to do marks that are not quite so obvious when doing this test. Okay, so that is the first, probably most well-known design for markings. Is using the kind of the clock design, and on a lot of card backs, the ornate type, you'll find a sort of clock pattern somewhere on there, or a petal pattern, or a place where you can color in certain aspects of a design to help you identify what the values and the suits are. Now, this requires that you know your system, you know it well, and that you know it inside and out, so that when you see the marking, you, as instantly as you can, know what it is. Okay? Another version of that same idea uses the opposite principle. This one is adding ink. We're adding ink to the back design to take out portions of the design that is there. The opposite of that is to cut away the ink that's on the back, to etch out on the design that is there, and to add more white to the back. So this is the same idea, but it is applied using etching. You can see that there's an etch mark right here. And again, I don't recall. Let's see if we can sort this out. Notice this is not symmetrical, that the left and the right read the same way. I'm going to assume that this is a spade because nothing is etched over here differently. Actually, I think on this one I used a different system. I think on this one, my recollection, I haven't used these cards in a while, I etched the top 3 parts here so that everything would be very local. And I put an extra line above one of these petals to identify, but I see no line there, so I think this is a spade, and this is probably a 3 of spades if it's using the same kind of marking system. So ace would be nothing, 2 would be the top, and that would be 3. Let's see if it's right. So indeed it is a 3 of spades. So same idea. Marking on the petals by adding or etching out some of the color. Now, doing a court card, let me see if I can find a court card in here. Actually, the very next one is a court card. To do a court card, what I did is I just etched inwardly towards the center. So I etched in, going this direction, and I can see here I have a line going up to that border. So I'm assuming this is spades, hearts, clubs, and diamonds. I'm assuming that's a diamond. And this might be a jack of diamonds. Let's see if I'm right, because it is etched from the inside going up to the top petal rather than from the top petal going outward. And it is the jack of diamonds. So this is another way to mark cards. Now, etching on cards is actually pretty simple. It's actually pretty simple. I'm going to use one of these over here. I don't even have a complete deck. I actually used some of these cards a long time ago. It's an incomplete deck to do some gaffed cards. So I'll just show you very quickly. You can take a sharp item like a pin. See if I can get this to focus. So this is a sewing pin or a sewing needle. Not really getting lined up here. And what you do is you use the tip of it, very, very sharp point, to etch. Okay. Now you can use a pin, or you could use, some people like to use push pins for this. You can use a push pin, but it needs to be a really, really sharp push pin. The sharper the better. Some people will use an X-Acto knife or some kind of craft knife that's super, super sharp, a razor sharp knife, a blade to scratch and etch. I found that a dressmaking pin, a sewing pin, is probably best suited for this. But what you do is you just use the tip of it, and then you scratch. Maybe I'll just scratch, and then we'll put a line right here. If you scratch actually very lightly, it removes the plastic coating and the very thin layer of ink, and then it's just paper underneath that. And you just brush it off, and you can add lines wherever you desire to put them in. Now, I just want to say this about making markings with etching. Some people say that they don't like etching because it is not consistent enough. I would think of it like this. When you write your signature, when you write your signature out, you will note that your signature is rarely identical one time to another. Your name is the same. You essentially write your letters in the same sort of style, but it is never the same. Yet at the same time, somehow we know who wrote that signature because of the letters that are there. You do not need to worry about consistency when etching. It doesn't have to be perfectly the same card to card. It just needs to be consistently located card to card so that when you read it, you can understand it quickly. Okay? Just like you can read a name, a signature, and you know who it belongs to by the style and by the format of the letters. You do not have to be so precise and so specific marking to marking. It just needs to be roughly the same thing. I would say that marking with etching, in my opinion, is a lot harder to see on an ornate back than marking with filling in. If you take a look at these two, let me see, I'll find another one here. I mean, if you just compare these two, the marking of the missing petal stands out, I think, a lot more than the addition of, or the reduction of ink. So the addition of ink, I think, stands out a lot more than the reduction of ink. So that's just something to consider when you're choosing your favorite mode for marking. So that is a secondary mark deck using the same kind of clock principle, but we're using etching instead. We can apply this to other types of designs as well, the same kind of code, clock code. So let's take a look at that next. So I have here a B deck, and this B deck has been marked using etching. We did not add ink, but we etched away. You could add ink if you wanted to, but I feel that if you were to reduce the white on the grid in some way, I think that would be noticed fairly quickly. So, in my opinion, I think it's better to take ink away. I think it's less noticed. I've etched in a number of different ways before, and I found this was the easiest one to see. However, being that it's the easiest one to see, it may be the easiest one to catch out. The good news is that the etching is so small, it doesn't look more than just an artifact on the card, or a crack on the card, or a speck of dust or something like that. I don't think it's something that a spectator would really note as they looked at them. You'd have to really be looking for markings. And they don't stick out very easily, but you can probably start to see it right now if you're looking in the right corner. If you can't see it, then that's a demonstration of how difficult this one is to notice. But over here, there's a diamond that has a little extra etching on it. And you'll notice that on this design, see how close I can get. Oh, that's not bad. Yeah. See if it'll focus in. You'll notice on this design that there are 1, 2, 3 blocks on every side of the diamond that is surrounded by blue ink. So there's 3 blocks on the upper right of every diamond. There's 3 white blocks on the lower right. There's 3 white blocks in the lower left and 3 white blocks in the upper left. And what I thought was I would etch in to the diamond within the parameters of those blocks, and that would give me 3 on either side of the diamond. So I could count 1, 2, 3 on the upper right, up here. 1, 2, 3. I could count 4, 5, 6 down here, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. That gets me to 12, and I need 1 more. So if there's no marking, that would represent a value, and then I have 12 markings thereafter to work with, and that gets me a total of 13. If you think about this, spades, hearts, clubs, it's got a marking for the club. Diamonds would be up there, and you'll notice that the next diamond doesn't have anything on it, making it an ace. Okay, so again, the thing about these is you want to be caught up on your code, or else it's hard to notice what they are. I don't use these all the time. So ace of clubs. Let's see if we can figure out the next one based on that. Again, I just used a pin to just etch this out. You have to be steady-handed, get up nice and close. You got to be able to see well. So it looks like I'm using the 2 diamonds that are in the corner. So the first 2 set of full diamonds that you see, and this is fairly consistent on B backs, that you have a diamond bisected on every side, and then there are 2 full diamonds in every corner. Okay, so this one here looks like this would be the suit. So the suit in this case is the, let's see if I can get the focus here. I should have used a macro lens for this, I think. It looks like this is going to be the heart. So spade, hearts, and it looks like this is going to be the 9 of hearts. Okay, so 9 up here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or rather 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then hearts. Let's see if that's what it is. 9 of hearts is right. Okay, so let's just see if we can read these a little bit quicker. This one here looks like it's going to be the 5 of hearts. 5 of hearts. Right? This one looks like it's going to be the Jack of diamonds. Right? So if you know your code, you can read it off fairly quickly. So yeah, you can apply the same clock principle to any kind of design that might be on the back, and there happens to be an appropriate clock design on the back of B cards with the number of blocks that surround each diamond. Okay, so this is done in both corners. And from normal distance, I can set this on the table, and with my eyesight, which is pretty good with my glasses on, I can see those markings, and I can make those out, and I can identify what they are without having to stare very closely at them. I can see them. Okay? So some of you may think this is too small for you. That may be the case. So this isn't a way that you're going to want to go. Lastly, we're going to look at my favorite method. And this is one that I did recently. And I think I'm probably going to stick with this for a while and try this out in performance and see if I can get a routine together with marked cards. These are readers. I'll tell you where I got the idea from. I was looking at various marked cards that are on the market, and Penguin Magic sells a type of marked card that are readers. They are the bicycle type design, they are maiden back bicycles because you have the bicycle back, the mandolin back, and the maiden back, and these other two backs that are not the bicycle type back, they're kind of an offshoot, so that the back design can be monkeyed around with and messed around with. You cannot alter a bicycle back and then print them. Bicycle has very strict standards about that trademark of their back, the copyright on that. So you can make something very similar, but it can't be the same. So along come the mandolin back and the maiden back, and those are usually the types of designs that look very, very similar to the bicycle back, except the person is a little different, and some of the geometry is different, and the designs are a little bit different. There's essentially the same types of elements in the same location, such that a normal spectator would not know the difference between them. But these other types of backs are being printed with designs encoded into them that are just very easy to read, and Penguin sells a deck that does this, and there's, I think, 6 different places on the card where you can just straight up read what the identity of the card is. And that is the case with this one right now, and I would bet that if you're looking at it, you probably wouldn't know where it's at. Even if I told you that it's there, it's probably not something that's going to stand out to you right away. You might stare at this for quite some time and not notice where it's at. And that's the benefit to doing this, is that it gets the markings out of that common location and puts it in a different place. Each one of these is marked only once. You can actually do the flip test, and you'll probably have a hard time seeing them given where they're marked, even though they're easily seen. You probably don't see a thing going on in there. There is something changing. You might not notice it right away. I am trying to be fair here. But let's take a look at what's going on with these and how you can make a deck yourself and make some own choices how to create some readers of your own using a fairly inexpensive bicycle deck. Okay, first of all, you're going to need to have a bicycle deck of cards, or really any design. You can probably apply this principle to any design of cards and make it work. You will probably need, to make this work, something to etch, and you will need something to draw. Okay, so you're going to need a marker, a fine tip marker in a similar ink tone, and you'll need something to etch, because we're going to do a combination of these two things to generate our readers. You're going to have to combine different methods to get your letters and your numbers in there. A couple things about this, first of all. These are very easy to use. Once you do this once, you will see how quickly you can read them, and it's a no-brainer. You don't even have to think about your system. I'll just cut into it here and we'll see how this works. But I've got 5 of clubs, 6 of diamonds, 4 of diamonds, queen of spades, 9 of clubs, ace of clubs, and so on. Okay, so I can read these very, very quickly, very easily. They simply read right out, okay, based on where they are marked. Also, this is probably something you can hand out to a spectator, and they ain't going to find it. They're just not going to see what's going on with that. Because it's marked in a different place, they could be even knowledgeable of markings, and unless you know what's going on, you're just not going to notice this. They do read very easily, but the lettering is a little bit wavy and unorthodox, so it's not something that you're going to just pick right out and notice. Unlike the Penguin design, which has 6 markings all over it, there's only 1. And I located it at the place where I would most easily see it on a left to right spread, which is going to be in this quadrant over here. And they're just marked once in each side. Additionally, I put a marking on these to identify a one-way design. That's actually something I did with this etched marking over here. You'll note that one side of this has an extra line drawn off the tip of this design right up here that the other side does not, and that would allow me to do one-way design tricks. I know that if a card has been reversed. So I put a marking on here to give me one-way design as well. And if you haven't seen it yet, if you see this card here and this card here, so I'll say it again. This is 5 of clubs, don't know if you can see that. This is 6 of diamonds. This is 4 of diamonds. This is Queen of Spades. I don't know if you can see this, okay? Let me show you what's going on. To do this, I think I might want to have a good card to compare with. So this is a Joker. The Joker does not have anything missing on it. The Joker is complete. And if we try to compare this, you'll see what's going on. So down here, you'll notice that there is some geometry right in here. Some lines that are going at angles to each other. And I felt that I could probably turn most of that geometry using addition and subtraction of color into letters and numbers to read. And what I did here is I put my numbers, my values in this area, either using this space over here or this one. And then I put my suit on this little design right over here. There's a little line there. And then I etched away from that to create a variety of letters that I could identify quickly. So this is the 5 of clubs. Now, if you're looking at this, you'll see that there's a 5 right here. Okay, 5 of clubs. Little C right there. Okay, 5 of clubs. So what I did, if you compare the designs, is I etched a piece up here for the top of the 5. I etched a little hook down here for the bottom of the 5. I etched the little piece on the bottom for a C right there, and I turned this into a C for clubs. And then I took my red marker and I cut off. I just made little cuts to break up the lines that met up with my 5 at odd points so that I would see only the number that I want to see. Now, let me explain probably the best way to go through this. What I did was I separated out my cards into numbers. So I put all values together, all the aces, all the 2s, all the 3s, all the 4s, all the 5s, all the 6s, and so on. And then I went 4 cards, 4 of a kind by 4 of a kind, and I settled on a way to do my value. And then I did a uniform marking for that value. Okay? And then I went back through and I took each one and I decided on a uniform design for the suit. And then I just made sure that I was doing the same thing for every suit. So let me take a 4 of a kind out of here and you'll kind of see what's going on. We'll go with the aces very quickly. These are the first ones that I did. This was time consuming. I'm not going to lie. This took me an afternoon to get a deck done. It took me maybe a couple of hours. Now that was the first time I did it. I am assuming that if I ever revisit this again, and I probably will, and I'll probably change my designs a little bit because I came up with, I would do a value and then I'd be done with it, and then I would look back and I would think that I probably had a better way to do that. So I probably will revisit this at some time, and I'll probably do it quicker the next time. But I've got my cards here, and I'll put them in order. So spades, hearts, clubs, and diamonds. And if we look at the back, we'll see what's going on. Right away, you probably will note, again, if I can get a focus on this, you probably will note an ace over here. So there's an A. I just put the cross member, and that's the only marking I made. And then over here is spade. So I took that one little line down here and I turned it into more of a Z-looking S. So I put 2 scratches. So this only has 3 scratches on it. 1 there, and then 2 over here to make an S. Ace of spades. So I look at that. I know it's the ace of spades. I didn't do any other marking on it. We'll talk about that in a minute, how much marking you should do. This has the exact same marking for ace. And then I put 2 lines perpendicular to that line that's in there to give me an H for heart. Ace of hearts. And next one over here, I've got ace of clubs, and you already saw that C for clubs. So there's my A and my clubs. And then the last one, ace of diamonds. This one's a little bit abstract, but I thought I could add a line and then another line and give me kind of a triangle form that would just remind me of a D. Okay, and because they all look the same, that's okay. It can be a little abstract. It doesn't have to be perfect. I will always know that that's a D. I won't have to think about what that is. I'll just know what that is. Okay, so ace of diamonds. Let's take a look at another set here. We'll look at 2. And the other benefit to doing this is as you make them, you know them. And that's kind of the learning process, is making them. We'll just take these 3. These are the ones I've got. So you get an idea here just by seeing the 2, because all the suits are marked the same way universally throughout. So the 2 is this right here. I added a line on the top, I added one on the bottom, and that's a 2. Now it's not exactly in the same spot, but it's relatively where that ace was, that A. And then I used my marker and I broke the line up so I could see my 2 a little bit more clearly. So 2 of clubs, 2 of hearts, 2 of diamonds. Okay? So all of the letters are in the exact same place, and all the numbers are in the same place. I'm not hunting around in different places to find it. We looked at the 5. This is a queen. So the queen is this little section right here. Looks like a Q. And I took a marker and I broke up the line in there, and I broke up the lines around that box. I added a couple of etches, top and bottom, and I made a Q. Queen of spades. Okay, so I can see these really easily from an arm's length. I can see these with my eyesight, and I can just read what they are. So these are readers that are very hard to detect. If you want to put the time in, I think this is a pretty good idea to make marked cards. This is a 6. There it is, 6 of clubs. Okay. Again, you're etching and you're removing. Let's talk very quickly about how much. Okay, how much do you etch? How much do you move? This is the basic principle I came up with when I decided to do this. This is a rule I followed, I made for myself. I wanted to etch and mark as little as possible, but as much as I needed to know what it was. Okay, as little as possible, but as much as I required to know what it was instantly. It was important that I had a fine balance in between. So I found myself maybe making 2 or 3 etches and maybe 1 or 2 marks most of the time to get it right. And once I did the first one in a group of 4, I found that I did the other 3 pretty quickly thereafter. The hardest part was just deciding on what I wanted to do. I tried to be consistent as well. So when I did a 6, I tried to do the inverse to do a 9. If I could do the exact same thing upside down, I wanted to be able to notice them and compare them and have them related very closely. But that is the process. So again, just a quick test. If I cut into it here, I've got 9 of spades. I've got 10 of spades. Here's my 10, by the way. So 10 looks like this. There's a little 0 and there's a 1. 10 of spades. 10 of spades. So 10 of spades. Jack of diamonds, 3 of hearts. Take a look at this. My 3 over there looks like a 3. 3 of hearts. 7 of hearts. This one had a lot of markings on it. I kind of regret this one, but you can see the 7 right in there, and then there's the heart figure. I think I'll do that one different next time. 5 of hearts. 6 of spades. Queen of diamonds. Okay, you can see how this works. This is the 8. The 8 looks interesting. So you can see it's an angular 8, but it's obviously an 8. If I know what the 8 is, I can see it right away. It's a figure 8, and then the S marking there, 8 of spades. 9 of hearts. 10 of diamonds. Jack of spades. Okay. Now, on top of that, one other marking I put on here, you'll note, is that I took a petal off. There's a piece of ivy right here, a 3-petaled piece of ivy in the design. I took a petal off right there on the upper side of the deck. So I put on the upper side of the card. So I put all the cards in one-way order. We've talked about one-way order before based on the face design, so they're all facing the proper way. And then on the top side, I remove that petal. On the bottom side, the petal is still there. So if I do a trick where I have a card removed and I don't look at it, or I have someone take a card out in some manner in which I'm not identifying what it is, they can return it in reverse. I can turn the deck around and I can easily find it based on the one-way back design, that one marker. So those are readers, marked readers, do-it-yourself marked readers using some etching and some marking, and you too can have something that's very easily read and very hard to detect because of its location and its camouflage within the design. You really can't see these even very well just in spreading the cards. I'm looking right at them, and I can see how every card is different. But to a spectator, this is not really noticed, particularly if you consider that a spectator is looking at cards this way. I mean, that design is not detectable over here, that the design is different from that side to the other side. You can't make that out. It doesn't have any logic, particularly when it's upside down to a spectator. So I would be comfortable, I think, giving a card like this to a spectator and having them deal with it. Not inspect it, but deal with it. And I don't believe they would notice anything about it. So there you go. Marked cards, quite a long little discussion there about various types of do-it-yourself markings from code-type markings and clock markings to readers that you can make using an ornate design, a little bit of etching, a little bit of drawing, a little bit of craft work, and there you have it. So best of luck with this. Give it a shot. Try it out. Just make a set of marked cards and use them and for regular tricks and see how it influences what you do. And I wish you the best of luck with that, and happy magicking.